They laughed as I climbed out of the wreck. My dad stood at the curb smirking, saying I was worthless and a waste of his time. My chest felt like it would break, and I drove home with the dent and his words. They had no idea what was coming next. I wasn't the scared girl anymore. Those were the first words I heard when the tow truck left my car in the driveway. My dad said it loud enough for neighbors to turn their heads. I stood on the porch, key in hand, feeling small. My name is Rachel Porter. I'm 28. I work in accounting at a small firm in Dayton, Ohio. My mom tried to squeeze my hand, and she looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. My dad, Tom Porter, runs Porter Auto, the family dealership. He's in his late 50s, sharp, proud, and cruel when he wants to be. This house and the loan were in my name for a year while I paid my share. My job mattered. My car mattered. My reputation mattered. That night he told me I was worthless in front of my neighbors and my co-workers who later texted me. I could feel the heat of humiliation. My boss had once hinted I was not ready for promotion. My savings were modest. I had a small student loan and an apartment lease. My stakes were real. Rent, my job, my credit, and a future I was trying to build. I went inside, shut the door, and sat at the kitchen table with the dent paper on my lap. The silence felt like a challenge that I thought about storming into the dealership, but I didn't. Anger felt useless without a plan. I made tea and started a list. What I had, what I owed, what could change. I slept badly that night. They had no idea what I planned next. I kept working. I showed up at the office and smiled through a meeting while my mind ran numbers. My coworkers didn't know what my dad had said. Only Jessica, my closest friend at work, noticed I was quieter. She's 30, practical, and the kind of person who tells you the truth. I told her the short version, just enough so she could help me keep my head in the game. Back at home, the dealership hummed like always. Porter Auto sold SUVs and pride to the town. My dad loved being the boss. He loved showing off his new suits and pointing at sales graphs like trophies. My brother, Mark, 32, worked in parts and tried to be neutral, but he followed Dad's lead. The first week after the crash, my dad started leaving passive-aggressive notes around the house about responsibility. He called me careless in front of customers when they came for test drives. My credit card was still on autopay. The bank sends reminders. I had a modest savings account with $12,000. Enough for a buffer but not for a takeover dream. I enrolled in an extra night course to increase my promotion chances. At work I found mistakes in a vendor contract. I reported them the right way. To HR and to a mentor who owed me a favor. It made the vendor nervous, and I kept the file. Small legal moves. Not revenge yet, just building blocks. I started learning about business law and dealership structures in spare hours. I paid attention to who handled titles, loans, and the tiny print Dad never read. Foreshadowing. An old loan agreement with a missing signature would matter later. I told myself patience would be my weapon. The betrayal came slow and then all at once. One morning I opened my mail to find a notice. Dad had transferred the title of my old apartment parking spot to Mark without telling me. It was petty and symbolic. I confronted him. He shrugged and said I should be grateful to live under his roof. The humiliation now had a legal edge. I checked county records and found other small transfers. A rental agreement shifted. A guaranteed line of credit altered. My dad had been moving paper without telling anyone. At dinner I kept my voice steady while my mom looked worried and Mark avoided my eyes. At work, the vendor's worries grew. The errors I'd reported were getting fixed, and one executive quietly thanked me in an email I saved. I felt the scales beginning to tilt. I found something crucial. A business loan for Porter Auto listed my father, and a guarantor with a weak signature on one page. Dates didn't line up with when Dad said he was away. I began to suspect Dad had been shifting titles and funneling small sales to shell buyers to hide inventory. It was not grand theft yet, but a pattern of control that could ruin someone who pushed back. Foreshadowing hint. The shell buyers used one email domain that linked to a scrap company near the county line. I printed the records and backed them up to a secure drive. I realized this needed banks and lawyers, not shouting. Things escalated when a customer complained that a car sold by Porter Auto had a hidden salvage title. The customer posted in a local forum, and the post went viral in our town. Dad called it bad luck and blamed a used car market problem, but one of the forum replies quoted a listing that matched a VIN I had seen on the scrap company files. My stomach dropped. Mark started asking me why I was so involved. He'd gone from neutral to defensive. The dealership hired a consultant who poked around inventories and found gaps. Customers asked for refunds. The bank began to ask tougher questions about the loan documents and cash flow. My name was still not involved in the business, but whispers started of mismanagement, of family drama. My mom took to sleeping in the guest room. I kept my day job but spent nights connecting dots, shell emails, transfer dates, and a ledger that didn't add up. One evening, Dad cornered me in the garage, furious. He told me I'd ruined his reputation, that the business was bigger than my feelings. He threatened to cut me off financial help and hinted he could freeze accounts. Those words were the final push. I had to be smarter. I reached out to Jessica and another ally, a friend from my night course, Aisha, who worked paralegal hours at a small firm. Aisha was meticulous and energized by puzzles. Jessica agreed to hold my work files and act as a character witness later if needed. Foreshadowing. An old insurance claim would be requested during an audit. It would reveal another signature mismatch. I made copies of every document I could access. The town was watching, and the stakes were higher than embarrassment. My family's business, legal exposure, and my security were on the line. I stopped reacting. I organized. Aisha helped me understand what evidence mattered. Signed titles, bank transfers, and correspondence linking Shell buyers to Porter Auto. We opened a secure folder and put copies of every document I could legally obtain. Jessica promised to safeguard my work email and act as a witness to my character at any hearing. I also enrolled in an online short course about small business accounting to speak clearly about finances when needed. I paid for it out of my savings. My plan had 3 parts: protect my credit, collect clean evidence, and push for an audit through the bank. I met quietly with a local investigator, recommended by Aisha, who suggested civil discovery and subpoena strategy if the bank didn't act. He said banks hate uncertainty and will pull audits when loan documents look shaky. Legal pressure could force disclosure. We found more: an unsigned invoice, a duplicate VIN entry, and a payment routed through a shell company's account. Each piece on its own was small. Together they formed a paper trail. I digitized everything and backed it up off-site. One ally I never expected was an old customer named Frank, who owed Dad a favor but hated shady deals. Frank agreed to provide a statement about a bogus sale if I could show him the VIN and dates. He wanted clean, legal proof before speaking. My moves were calm and by the book. I filed a complaint with the bank's fraud unit and attached initial documents. That triggered a review. I waited without showing teeth. Patience was part of the plan. Foreshadowing. When the bank opened the loan file, the weak signature would be noticed by an auditor who hated sloppy paperwork. Over the next month, I turned evidence into leverage. Aisha drafted a list of questions we could legally ask the bank. Jessica kept tabs on company emails and saved a voicemail where Dad admitted he moved cars to friends. Frank pulled old sales receipts and matched them with my printed ledger. We kept everything above board. We did not fabricate. We used public records, customer statements, and internal slips that looked sloppy enough to be suspicious. I contacted a small consumer journalist at the city paper with a careful outline. No accusations, just facts and documents. She agreed to look at the records if the bank found irregularities. The bank's fraud team took the initial complaint seriously and requested Porter Auto's loan files. An auditor arrived and noticed the signature problem on the guarantor page. The auditor paused and asked for explanations. Dad fumbled, offering vague stories about a rushed sign-over during a family emergency. His answers were inconsistent. My boss noticed I'd been under pressure and offered a conditional promotion if I could demonstrate leadership under stress. That helped secure my job stability. Aisha suggested preparing for civil suits and possible criminal referrals if the bank found evidence of fraud. I arranged for a meeting with the bank manager and let the auditor uncover discrepancies on their timetable. The advantage: the bank feared losses more than family drama. As they dug, the consultant at the dealership pushed for an internal cleanup. which hid documents that Aisha had already backed up. Foreshadowing hint. One backup copy on a flash drive would survive an attempted cleanup. We were ready. Execution was quiet and surgical. The bank called a meeting at the branch with Porter Auto and presented the discrepancies. I sat in the back with Aisha and Jessica. Dad tried to smile and deflect. The auditor laid out the facts. Mismatched Vince Shell Company transfers, and that weak guarantor signature. The bank demanded immediate explanations and threatened to call law enforcement if answers didn't satisfy them. At that moment, Mark's eyes darted to paperwork on his phone. He had been part of moving small titles. Under pressure, he slipped and admitted he signed documents for a buyer who never picked up the car. The buyer turned out to be a Shell LLC linked to the scrap company. Dad tried to pivot, blaming contractors and paperwork mistakes. The bank froze a tranche of funds while they expanded the review. Meanwhile, I handed the journalist a copy of the clean timeline and a friendly customer statement from Frank. The next morning, a cautious article ran. Facts only, no accusations, pointing to a bank audit. Customers called Porter Auto asking for clarifications. The consultant quit, and the town began to whisper loudly. The board at Porter Auto convened. With the bank applying pressure and legal counsel advising, the board voted to place Dad on temporary leave while an external accountant reviewed records. That was the turning point. Dad's control evaporated in one formal vote. The bank started recovery steps on suspicious transfers, and law enforcement opened a preliminary inquiry. Mark quietly cooperated, providing receipts and emails we already had. The dealership's valuation dropped. I watched as the man who mocked me lost power through legal and financial means. Calm, precise, and predictable. In the aftermath, consequences were real but measured. Porter Auto paid fines, adjusted records, and repaid questionable transfers where possible. Dad faced legal hearings and a damaged reputation. He stepped down from daily management and began taking anger management and financial oversight classes the board required. Mark lost his position in parts and took a job out of town. I didn't take pleasure in his fall. I took satisfaction in the truth coming out and in protecting my future. The bank offered me a chance to join a small committee advising on family creditor arrangements. An odd role, but it stabilized my finances. My promotion at work went through, and my boss publicly acknowledged my steadiness during the town controversy. My relationship with Mom shifted. She apologized for not stopping Dad sooner and helped me repair our home. We had hard conversations about respect and boundaries. I paid back my debts, kept my apartment, and replaced the dented car months later with my own savings. The town's gossip faded. The biggest lesson was about power and paper. Dad thought humiliation would keep me small. Instead, I used paperwork, banking rules, and calm allies to force transparency. Revenge wasn't about ruin. It was about restoring balance and safety. I didn't buy the dealership in cash, contrary to what some rumors later claimed, but I did secure a seat at the table that protected my name and my credit. I learned to let the law handle crooked paper and to be patient. In quiet moments I still feel the old sting, but it's softened. The last scene is simple. Me, a clean kitchen table, a repaired bumper in the garage, and a forward-looking list of goals. Peace felt earned.